The sporting event which must not be named is complete, and thus we come to the final video in our series on ancient Greek cuisine. So far, our recipes have been inspired by the more privileged members of ancient Greek societies, those with access to fresh fish, for example, fresh vegetables. Our use of honey as a sweetener has been unbounded, the lifestyle of people who can afford to enjoy their food. Today we examine other diets, alternative ways of eating in the city-states of ancient Greece. From diets of choice, abstinence and philosophy, to diets enforced by economic circumstances, those who were less well off. We start with the big V, vegetarianism. Some of you will be rolling your eyes and thinking, darned hippies and their vegetables. But vegetarianism is nothing new. Pythagoras was a great advocate of eating as far as possible only veg. Yes, the very same Pythagoras who gave us the mathematics of right-angled triangles. It was thought in avoiding the consumption of animals, one also avoided consuming potentially reincarnated human souls. Those who prescribed to the teachings of the mythic poet and prophet Orpheus, here on the left, had similar beliefs about the transmigration of souls. Human souls were trapped for a time in a cycle of bodily incarnations. Eating an animal meant eating a human being. The philosopher Empedocles compared eating meat to as grievous an act as eating one's own family, saying, "A father takes up his dear son who has changed form and slays him with a prayer, so great is his folly." The ancient Greek practice of medicine was another philosophy influencing diet. Hippocrates lived in the 5th and 4th centuries BC and was a pioneer in the history of medicine. It is after him that the Hippocratic Oath is named, and some call him the father of Western medicine. Hippocrates famously said, "Let food be thy medicine, and medicine be thy food." He is accredited with applying the notion of humorism to medicine. Here, an imbalance in one of 4 main bodily fluids can cause illness. For example, if a patient drinks too much water, or even milk, this may cause an aggravation of phlegm. Too much phlegm means illness. If a patient were unwise enough to overindulge in a food such as nuts, here pine nuts, not only would he be amorous, but this would aggravate black bile, and overproduction of black bile means illness. The consumption of spinach, green leafy vegetables, berries or meat would result in an aggravation and overproduction of blood. Too much blood could cause illness. These ideas, though now discredited, were very important. Not all of Hippocrates' ideas are so easily discredited. He made frequent use of salt in his healing methods. Around 460 BC, he recommended the inhalation of steam from salt water to provide relief from respiratory symptoms. This most certainly works. He suggested to avoid pregnancy that women eat carrot seeds. Some modern studies have indicated that there may be some validity to this theory in blocking progesterone synthesis. The 1st century AD Greek physician Dioscorides makes reference to sugar as a medicine. He makes reference to a curious coalesced honey called saccharon, much like salt, which can be used to treat a painful bladder and kidneys. Ancient Greek physicians knew all about the benefits of exercise and a balanced lifestyle. And as much as they used food as a medicine, they also warned against overconsumption. Not only was obesity unsightly in societies which so valued health, but it was one's duty to look after one's body in case you were ever called upon to fight for your city. Athletes were another section of society who subscribed to specific diets. As early as the 5th century BC, athletes were said to practice a diet based upon dried foods, such as dried figs, fresh cheese, and bread. By the 2nd century AD, the benefits of meat and protein were well understood. The physician Galen of Pergamon commented that athletes of his day were always gorging themselves on flesh and blood. Around the 2nd and 3rd centuries AD, Athenaeus wrote in his book, Dinner Table Philosophers, about a certain wrestler, the mighty multiple Olympic champion Milo of Croton. It was said that this man-mountain could easily eat 20 pounds of meat in one meal. This mass of flesh was equalled only by the 20 pounds of bread which he also devoured. And to wash this down, he could happily drink 3 pitchers of wine. It was said that at the games he would carry a 4-year-old bull on his shoulders around the stadium, cut it up, prepare it, and eat it all in one day. Eventually, however, trainers began to enforce standard dietary rules for athletes. Such rules recommended staying away from desserts, not drinking cold water, and also avoiding wine. However, Hippocrates did recommend occasional drunkenness for athletes with sore muscles. The capacity for such specialized diets usually meant that athletes came from the upper classes of society. Though alternative, an athlete's diet, therefore, was usually a rich one. Next we travel to the southern city-state of Sparta for a special mention for an infamous brew. The Spartans were and are famed throughout the world as an elite warrior society. Equally famous and brutal was this dish made from boiled pork, along with blood, though probably not human blood. And to these were added vinegar. It is thought that the vinegar prevented the blood from clotting during cooking. With this stew, a Spartan might have more meat, figs, or cheese. But it was most certainly an acquired taste. One non-Spartan commented, "Naturally Spartans are the bravest of men in the world. Anyone in his senses would rather die 10,000 times than take his share of such a sorry diet." Now we ask, what of those who lack these? Coins, money. No matter your income, cereal was a staple. Barley the easiest to produce and therefore cheapest, but the most difficult to make into bread. The poorest in society, the hardest workers, had also to work hard for their daily bread. For the poorest city dwellers, fresh fish was a scarcity. Fish would be salted and brought inland, and the least desirable was also the cheapest. Here we see a parrotfish. In comparison, ancient price lists put bluefin tuna at 3 times the cost of a parrotfish. The least well-off city dwellers also had poor access to fresh vegetables. Such folk had to make do with dried vegetables, here dried mushrooms. And a typical workman's lunch consisted of lentil stew. This was avoided by the wealthy, for it was seen as a poor person's food, though it was prescribed by Hippocrates as a cure for liver ailments. The most destitute were even observed eating acorns, very difficult to process. Let us now end our ancient Greek adventure in solidarity with the poorest of society, as we go once again to the kitchen at 41 Feasts for a meal of limited means.
Hello, for the last in our series on ancient Greek recipes, we're going to turn to more frugal food with a lentil soup. The ingredients you will need are green or brown lentils, some garlic, a carrot, an onion, bay leaves, and of course olive oil. Here we have 225 grams of lentils, which I've prepared by boiling in water for 5 minutes and then draining. Return the lentils to the same pan and add about 2 pints of cold water. Bring to the boil and simmer for about 10 minutes. Then you need to add your chopped onion, carrot and 5 cloves of garlic finely chopped. Mix this in well. Next you add 50 ml of olive oil and a bay leaf. Stir, bring back to the boil and leave it to cook for about 3/4 of an hour to an hour. Our vegetables are tender and cooked through. I'm going to season with some salt and some pepper. Mixing it in well. I can remove the bay leaf and serve.
Right, spoon.
I'm glad to see you're using a spoon this time, Mark.
Well, yeah, well, this beard I've got no choice. So, let's have a taste. It's good. Yeah, the garlic really, well, gives it flavour. I imagine this would be a fairly flavourless stew otherwise.
I think so. There are 5 cloves of garlic in this, which seemed quite a lot when we started. And also it's got some salt in it, which again the Greeks may not have used, but certainly I feel it adds a bit.
It cuts against the bitterness. So salt may be a good addition, actually, definitely.
Cooking this reminded me of making Indian dals, where, although with an Indian dal you would usually fry your onions and your garlic in your oil to start with, and then add your spices and your lentils afterwards. Here, the olive oil has probably been used more for flavouring since we added it to it.
Yeah, very good. So there you go, well worth a try. This is the other end of the spectrum. This is poor people's food. It's a hearty meal, gets you through the day when you're a workman or workwoman, and not really much more to say, but well worth a go. So that is the end of our mini-series on ancient Greek food, specifically gastronomy. You notice we're not claiming that we're bringing you actual recipes. This is all about the flavours, because often these recipes are either anecdotes or they're simply based upon what people are observing. They're not written down as quantities, this kind of thing. Anyway, well worth a go. Now, what we'd love, this is the end of the 4 for this series, what we'd love is some feedback and essentially your thoughts on what you'd like to see in future archaeology gastronomies. We have some ideas possibly on periods and places that we want to go to next, but and I'm going to share them properly with Nicola. But nonetheless, we'd love to hear what you guys think, because essentially this is about tasting the food on your behalf to a certain extent. So yes, give all the recipes a go, check out the rest of the videos that we've done together, and I suppose until next time, bye bye.
Goodbye.